Hey guys, I just had an awesome conversation with Stephenie Sofield. She has the current episode on the Music in Our World podcast. Um, but a topic has come up, and I thought it would be good to put out some information that might be of good practical use to people. Um, we talk about the show, the popular Netflix show, 13 Reasons Why. Uh, and it should be known that I have not finished it. I've watched a little bit of it, so my input should be taken with that, obviously, with that grain of salt. But Stephenie's watched all of it. Stephenie's a working therapist. She's a music therapist, but works closely and knows what she's talking about when in this particular regard. So she, it's definitely an opinion, but it's an opinion that's backed with some research, some qualifications, some clout for sure. I'm super psyched that she was willing to share her perspective and talk with me again. It's an extremely important topic for me personally, and it's one that no one should take lightly. And the write-up for this post will have links to every sort of thing. What to do if you or somebody is struggling. And it'll be written all over the place. But I'll say it again. Get help. There's a lot of different ways you can get help. There's a lot of different people you can talk to. There's hotlines you can call. There's ways to reach out. If you're not personally struggling with depression or anxiety or suicidal thoughts or tendencies, then you go out of your way. If especially if someone's has seen the show and might have been triggered by something or might be going through something else completely unrelated, use this opportunity. Like, reach out. Don't just sit there and think that maybe it'll go fine, maybe everything will be okay. If there's somebody like you really think might be having some trouble, then be there for them. It's really important. We talk about a lot of different ways to do that. We also talk about her recent success with United Percussion, WGI just finishing, and United did really well this season. I did want to mention that a little bit, but obviously the bulk of the episode and our conversation was based on 13 Reasons Why and mental health and suicide and self-harm, like awareness and advocacy and all of these super important things. So I'm very grateful to Stephenie that she shared her time and expertise, and we're both really excited. This is going to be sort of a bonus episode. I didn't want to necessarily disrupt the flow of the other folks, because I've had wonderful conversations with all of these great people, but this was a very important topic, very important episode, and I think it is totally reasonable to go ahead and have it out as a bonus episode for you guys. If you have any questions or comments about the links or anything that we say or think or feel in the podcast, then please feel free to let me know. Post and comment, get the conversation started. As long as you're not saying, how great suicide and mental health disorders are, then I think we'll be in good shape. But please let me know and get the conversation started. Okay. But thank you for tuning in. And here's Stephenie. Okay, I think we're.
Feel so fancy.
I know, it's all official. I have my cucumber mint sparkling water. The
I just
fanciest.
have normal, boring water that I had to hide from my cat because he likes drinking out of my cup.
That's cool. I got you. Well, so let's see where I'm. Okay, so I have my pretty pink notepad too. I'm trying to get everything, all my ducks in a row. And well, first, first, as we're listening to this, your first episode is the current one, and it's getting some traction, so that's exciting.
Yeah.
Raising some awareness.
Oh.
Yeah, and I think that's really cool. I've had some people say, "Hey, it's a really interesting perspective. We like hearing about that." And so, super stoked to have you on again, especially with with indoor season wrapping up, and then the elephant in, I guess, just our rooms.
Yeah. We have elephant in a lot of people's rooms right now, honestly, I feel like.
Yeah. And so I think you and I had briefly spoken about that before. Let's maybe do that second. We'll definitely get to
Yep.
it. But yeah, first and a half. Thanks again for being on and sharing your insight and talking about some cool stuff. You're the first repeat guest, Stephenie Sofield.
Thank you for having me back.
Cool. Yeah, any opportunity I have to get you on, I'm probably going to take. So if you end up being on the show like 10 times, that is fine with me.
I won't be mad.
Okay, so, well, first, what have you been up to? What you been doing?
Work, but honestly, I just feel like WGI. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. We were in the last, the last couple of months is so. It's just like all you're doing. I feel like because even during the week, you're really trying to keep the members engaged and really in the right zone and really just focusing in. So everyone kind of just in the last couple of months is that final push when it's all about mentality and being in it. So I feel like I just came out of a whirlwind because that was last weekend. So I'm like trying to catch my breath.
We're not even yet a week removed. I remember fondly those days, marching and teaching. So cool. So remind us again, who you're with, what you're doing, and then things that we didn't really talk about last time. I didn't really ask you much about the show or a lot about the kids or what about. So I'd love to hear about it first of all, and then let you plug it a little bit.
Sure. So I was with United Percussion. They're from Camden County, New Jersey. We kind of turned some heads this year, so I think a lot of people are like, "Oh, hi." But I marched there in 2013, so it was kind of like coming home for me. I aged out there. I chose to age out with a cymbal friend because for us, it's really important. The cymbal line that we march with sometimes is the thing that we're drawn to. I know a lot of people will go for like instructors and things like that. So yeah, I went for a cymbal friend, and then so I was just a cymbal tech this season. And it was just really cool. We had a lot of new staff, a lot of young staff. We all kind of came together as a lot of us had marched together at different places. I think everyone but one person on the tech staff had marched there before. So it was a whole bunch of United alum, a whole bunch of people who've been shaped by United in some way or another, even if they went on to go do other indoor groups or these really amazing drum corps. Most people had been shaped by United in some way and then came back. And it was just really cool because we kind of figured out how to be a staff together because we all started the same time, the same year, and we were all pretty much the same age, just coming out of school. A lot of people are getting their masters in music. So it was really just like a ton of raw talent on the staff and a lot of experience for how young everyone was. And it was a really, really cool experience for sure.
That's great. I think I talked to people about building programs and being part of good programs, and they say it's having alum support is good, having alum teachers is really good. Are you guys is everyone going to stick around? Like that's another thing. Consistency from year to year helps a lot.
I can't speak to everyone. It's only been a week. I know that Paul's going to be back for sure. I know that for a fact, but I don't want to speak for anyone else. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of return I just don't want to like say for sure one
Of
way or
course.
another, just in case. But yeah, I know for sure Paul's coming back, and he was the caption head, and he did such a good job. He's really, really incredible. He marched SCV with Paul Rennick, and he's up at Rutgers. He's done a lot of he's done design or not design. I think he's done writing for a lot of groups,
Okay.
and he's with the cadets quad line this summer, so he kind
Right
of
on.
knows what he's doing.
I guess you could say
Yeah, so I know he'll be back.
that.
I know a lot of the front ensemble people will be back, and the United Front ensemble is ridiculous. They are incredible, absolutely incredible, and they have been for a long time. So, um,
Well, that's cool. I'm glad you had a good experience, and it's stuff's changing. Um, Stuff changing in the percussion side of WGI. I mean, I was looking at the rankings, and so many new groups are up there.
mhm,
Groups are moving around. So I'm assuming you guys felt pretty jazzed about the end of the season, and
mhm,
I'm not a huge placement person, but finals is always a big deal. Top
yeah,
ten is always a big deal.
mhm.
Um, so, uh, tell me a little bit about the show. What was the theme, and had the folks take to it?
Sure. So, I think the coolest thing is this year we got a lot of feedback. People saying it was their favorite United show or the best United show ever. And I have to agree, but I also saw it all the time. But so the show was called Sir Isaac's Wonder. And actually, at first, I really hated the title. I was like, why don't we just call it Gravity? Come on. But I think because it wasn't in your face gravity, I think it was so tasteful that kind of the tasteful title was okay. I think if we had said gravity 87 times and it wasn't called gravity, maybe it would have been different. But I think the show title, everyone really got it and it was fine. So it was about gravity, but so we had a lot of motifs around that idea. We had like some visual motifs that repeated a lot of people like getting pulled down to the ground. We had this giant orb in the back that literally did nothing but sit in the corner. It was huge. It was really, really big, and all it did was kind of motivate the visual and the drill towards it in a way. So we had a lot of stuff like that where there'd be motivation on the floor visually around maybe a pod of people. And then we had these canisters where we had our floating orbs, our floating balloons. So that was people would gravitate around that as well. So basically, the arc of the show was this idea that gravity or something or someone is holding you down, is keeping you grounded. And so there's these moments where there's a loss of gravity. So we had that musically with like bass drops, and we had panning. We had these like the sound system panned across the back, so we had these giant speakers. So we would have these giant like bass drops or like this. One of the sounds sounded like and Monty would be so much better like explaining this because he's a sound guy. He's brilliant. But there was this like one sound, honestly, it would sound like a spaceship docking. And I know that's not what it was, but I literally kept thinking that every time. And it would pan across the floor at the end of the first movement, and everyone would kind of move as if they lost gravity as it moved across the floor. So we had a lot of visual and sound interaction with that. Um, and we had like, in the ballad, we had a little bit of triumph over gravity. We had and one of our cymbal players basically climbed this human bridge and flipped over another one, and he was kind of suspended for a moment. So that's basically the visual and the sound element of it. Yeah. And at
Cool.
the end, it was like defy it. It was like defying gravity. And we had this giant cymbal toss, and all the balloons went up, and then a cymbal player jumped over and popped a balloon, and it was super cool.
Did you play Defying Gravity? And what is that?
Okay, no, I wish we did. Yeah, as soon as they said like the show's about gravity, all of us were like defying gravity. That and John Mayer. But our Viz girl Lauren, whenever she did warm ups with them, she would play Gravity by John Mayer, and then finals day she did Defying Gravity, and the kids all sing it. It's so funny to hear snare drummers singing along with Idina Menzel.
Oh,
It's great.
I, 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 remember those were good days.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, 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 uh,
Mm-hmm.
Well, what about the so what about the music? Do you remember any of the source material?
Hmm. Yeah, we played Canyon. I honestly can't remember who that's by. People kept thinking it was Philip Glass. That's definitely not true. And we played Roots of Coincidence, so Pat Metheny. So those are the big ones. Vertical River, we played. I don't know if that is a source piece. That was our ballad. I feel like I should have known that. But I know Roots of Coincidence was the one that people kept being like, "Oh yeah, Roots, I know this." So that was kind of the big one. There wasn't anything where it was like, "Oh, this song is about gravity," which I thought was really nice. There was nothing like in your face. It was just like really good music that they picked for like the sound of the music,
Mhm.
as opposed to being like, "This song is about space."
Well, I can definitely appreciate some subtlety
Mhm.
and that sort of letting the show speak for itself. So that's cool. I agree with you, and I think that's a more apt approach. Uh, okay, so that's good. And the you might I haven't really been following the indoor scene as much lately, just because I've been working on a million different projects and haven't even really had time. But is I saw like the flow marching thing. Is it like free to
Mhm.
watch? Like I could find a link and put it up somewhere.
I think I'm not super sure about how flow marching is. I know everyone has free access to all of the shows. Like we were posting a video from YouTube, I think. So I don't know if flow marching did it and then put it up on YouTube. I'm not sure, but after every show, like all three of them, everyone had access to a recording. So I don't know if they did that, and if they did, thank you so much. But
Okay.
I don't know if it was them. I don't know really what was going on with that.
Okay. Yeah, I'll do some research and yeah, have that in the write up because I think that's super cool. Indoors sort of it always will hold a place in my heart.
Mm-hmm.
So I love talking about it and I love sharing it with people. So I'll do that. Okay. So is there is there any other projects that you're working on? Outside of indoor, like that you're looking forward to in the next few weeks or months?
This is always so hard because that's like all I do is
Mhm.
work and indoor. I mean, I'm going to gig in Philly a little bit this summer with someone that did my internship, my clinical internship. He completed it a couple years before I did, so we're gonna get together and gig at at least one restaurant this summer. So that's probably the next thing I have, but that's pretty chill, I feel like. I'm going to go on tour with Pacific Crest this summer. Just for 1 week, I'm the fill-in tech. But other than that, I'll be taking the summer off from drumline and kind of decompressing, refocusing on music therapy and the growth in that way. I'm still trying to finish my master's, so probably should do that.
I know what you mean. I'm getting ready to start mine next fall, so
Yeah, woo. Good luck.
I'm excited. Get to write all sorts of fun music, but I also want to I want to have some outreach and stuff as part of it as well. So that's that's why that's why I keep asking. Hey, what are you up to? What are you up to? Can I
Mm-hmm.
be involved? Can I,
Yeah, I'm not, I don't know, I'm not doing anything performance wise or comp wise or anything, unfortunately, that I know of at least yet.
Well, and is this we're in an industry that could change like boom.
Yeah, you're totally right. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I for I've talked with a few people about. I want to let's go ahead and talk about the show. Um, and I took some notes and I've been really thinking about it and sort of talking with some other folks just to get perspective, not necessarily opinion, because I haven't seen it or read it. For those of you listening, we're going to talk about 13 Reasons Why, and I think I've watched only a little bit of it. I have not read the book, whether or not it's good or bad, I like to let people decide for themselves, and I'm certainly hoping to hear in detail Stephenie's opinion for our listeners. But it's a very important piece of literature and theater, and um, if you want to call it art, some people can call it art, but it's definitely an important thing. Whether or not it's good or bad, sort of remains to be seen. Um, and I'm not going to go into too much detail on it as far as the show actually is, because I have not seen all of it. Also, I want to clarify that I'm curious more about the show. I don't know, Stephenie, if you've read the book.
I haven't read the book, but I have read a lot about the differences between the book and the show, so I know a lot about that.
Okay, and I think that's an important distinction, because some people may come to the defense of the story, and just playing devil's advocate, I have no clue about the book. I have not. I don't know what the cover looks like, but the show, I think, is even more important, because you could happen upon it looking at Netflix, where if it's a book, you kind of have to order it or pick it up, and some people forgot how to operate books a few years ago. So that's our discussion will be about the show and other things. So about the storyline, if you're listening to this and you don't know what the story is, just go experience it yourself, and then come back to this if need be, if you're interested. But I took some notes on just the first episode. So Stephenie, I want to hear your just overall broad, and I know you've kind of been itching to get to it. So I'll let you.
I don't know. I don't know if itching is the right word. It's just I don't want to say I don't want to be careful. I have a lot of opinions. I have a lot of opinion based on research. I have a lot of opinion based on objective fact. A lot of opinion gathered from other people that work in the mental health profession. So I want to just be very clear that the things that I'm saying are from a mental health professional standpoint. And I think it is very important for, honestly, the mass population to take the opinion of mental health professionals very seriously, especially about a show that has been sensationalized and is extremely popular and has wide influence. I think it's very important for people to take a show that's about mental health seriously, and especially with our opinions as mental health professionals. And I think we do need to be careful about the things, like when we're telling people to watch it. A lot of people are like, you need to watch it before you make an opinion. And honestly, that's not true. Some people shouldn't watch the show. End of story. So I guess I want to ask how you want to go about it, because I have quite a few notes. I feel like I might have to be reined in. You might have to give me guidance on what you want, because I think I definitely take the standpoint that this show is going to have ripples. It has already. I have a story that I asked a mom if I could share from a past student about something that's already happened, and things that are happening to vulnerable adolescents that face suicide ideation. And then I also have thoughts about the representation of the character who faces suicide ideation, representation on mental health, the misrepresentation of depression, anxiety, and trauma, and how what happens in your brain, and the difference between the way that Hannah Baker, the main character, is portrayed and the way that mental health occurs actually in the brain. And the biggest one being the trigger scene. Yeah. And I understand why people are coming to its defense, but I also just want to point out, usually the people that are the people that are saying, if I imagine why someone would commit suicide, this would be why, instead of the people who have been through it and the people like me who work with it every single day. So I really ask that everyone take this very seriously. I've seen the reactions of people saying, you guys are overreacting. This is ridiculous. It's just a show. And unfortunately, I think that directly mirrors the reaction that people have to mental health in general. Oh, you're overreacting. Oh, it's not a big deal. Oh, it's just this. And it is really sad to me that these are mirrored reactions, but I think it's really telling as well. So I'm just asking that people take the professional opinion of those that work in the field very seriously and listen to those who are saying this is really bad.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, obviously, I agree with you. And with my experience in this is obviously not from a professional, like trained mental health standpoint. I've been a teacher. I teach and
Mm-hmm.
work with kids, and I've talked with music therapists, my friends that I had in school about some stuff like this because um, it's so important. I think important is the word. I think this is what you have to say is important, and what your colleagues have to say is important.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I think it's pertinent for this music podcast is because, um, and this will help you sort of, I guess, frame some of it. But I also
Mm-hmm.
just I do want to let you sort of give all that you want to, because it, like I said,
Sure.
it's so important. As a teacher of a fine art, as a music teacher, I've taught singers, I've taught band kids. I haven't taught orchestra kids. I've worked with them, but I've worked with musicians. I've taught a little bit. I've worked with some theater kids, kids that are more. I don't want. It's not even necessarily just kids, but students and other people that are in touch with the emotional side of things. What we call on them to do is in the emotional vein, and
Mm-hmm.
therefore they're a little bit more in touch. They're a little bit more,
Mm-hmm.
I don't, maybe susceptible to something. Uh, their their uh, their emotions can be more intense, and I think it's super important for teachers who might be working with kids, that students, people, even other teachers that might be exhibiting signs that maybe know what to look for, know how to deal with it a little
Mm-hmm.
bit better. Um, and anybody that knows me knows that I'm sort of anti-television, and that's one of the reasons why. Because some people say, oh well, um,
Mm-hmm.
they're bringing to light this topic, this subject. Oh, and people are talking about it now. Well,
Mm-hmm.
just because people are talking about it does not, for any stretch of the imagination, means that it's positive. Raising
Yeah.
awareness is only good if it's brought with from an objective standpoint. And I think some of the things probably you have to say, are to tell that it is objectively a dangerous thing, a
Yeah.
triggering thing to an already susceptible group of people. Um, uh, and so, I think I think it's very, you're very important. You are a very important person to me, and what you have to say is important. So, I want to let you sort of start, because it sounds like you've got some preparation done, and
Mm-hmm.
I'll interject as I can or feel like it's necessary, and I'm not going to rein you in much. So,
Okay. So I guess the first thing that I want to focus on, as I just really want to nail in the severity of the trigger and the suicide scene,
mhm.
because people, first and foremost, like everyone is saying, like this is very triggering. This was something that they did against the advice of people they consulted, and I would say anybody that it works in suicide prevention would have said, you don't show it. And I have access to some of the, like a list of things that um, suicide prevention says to do, certain ways to approach suicide that can help with suicide, like specific things to do to work with suicide prevention that I can share in a second. But
Mhm.
so the number one thing, I just want to share this story. I already asked the mom, and she was like, please share. So after I posted my very first thing, like I watched it. I probably watched 9 episodes before I was so angry and upset about the representation
Mhm.
that I quit. And then when I knew we were going to do this, I finished it so I could speak from a completely educated standpoint.
Uh-huh.
Because I think that's one of the things people are like, oh, if you haven't watched it, you don't have a right to speak about it. So I've watched it and I have a right to speak about it. And I'm also like educated, right? So both
Yes,
sides.
of course.
Um, so first I was really frustrated and I couldn't really voice why I was. Like I had a lot of thoughts about it and I just felt that there was a lot of invalidating things happening, which I want to get to all that second. But after I posted that very first thing, that Tumblr post that's going around
Mhm.
about how it's glamorizing and it's a trigger and all these things,
Yeah.
um, I had a mom of a past student texted me what had happened to her son. So backstory, I taught him in drumline, and he struggled with severe depression. And thank goodness I was in the middle of my therapy training, because I was able to kind of talk him down every once in a while and really be there for him. And I was never in any capacity his therapist, but I had the skills to kind of I guess ground him in those moments, and I knew like when to reach out to his mom and those things. But I've always been kind of part of his support team since then, like checking in on him. And I just mean like support, not team, but like frame, like part of that friends. And so I always check on him every once in a while. And he was doing really well. I think he ended up quitting senior year because it was just too much. It was really triggering for him. And he was doing really well, finishing up homeschool. And I think his last inpatient was maybe in September, and he was doing really, really well. Mm-hmm. And so his mom texted me. That was the last I heard. His mom texted me when I posted that and said he watched it, and she didn't know until it was too late. And they're very open with each other. She asks, she's amazing. She asks him every day, "How are you feeling today?" Or she says, "How are we feeling today? Yeah. Have you had any thoughts about self-harm?" And they have established such an open relationship about this, which is very rare, first of all. And I'll talk about that later. But so she said she found out too late because the trigger scene is the last episode. And a lot of the stuff that leads up to it is, I feel like it's very, it's like a booby trap trigger. A lot of the stuff that's happening, it's very slick. It draws you in, and you don't know why you feel upset. You don't know why you feel weird about it, especially as someone with suicide ideation. Mm-hmm. And then when you're in it and you're addicted and you want to know what happens because of the writing and the fact that it's TV and all of those things that they know how to draw you in. And she told me he watched the suicide scene over and over and over and over, that's a trigger. That's what that is. And she got home and had to take him to an inpatient psychiatric institute where he was institutionalized for 2 weeks. And I have a quote from her that I wanted to read. It says, "While the show wasn't exclusively responsible for the bottom dropping out, it was a huge contributing factor that led to his suicidal ideation and subsequent hospitalization." So that's one of my students, just one. I'm one person, and that's one student whose mother reached out to tell me, who I have a good relationship with. That's just one. And to me, that's enough for it to be an issue. That's enough. Especially because if you're having, I'm like really stressed out about this. If you're having psychologists say you cannot show this, it's a how to commit suicide. It is a guide. It is, look, this is exactly how you do it. Mm-hmm. And for someone that their brain has been wired differently because of the chemical differences of depression, of anxiety, of trauma. And I'll talk about that too, about why that's different for them. Visual stimuli is one of the strongest things for those individuals. For example, veterans who have PTSD, they found when they're doing like the Rorschach ink blot test, there's a couple of things they find in it, which is kind of irrelevant for this conversation. But one of the biggest thing is when they have the ones that have red, the color, it's called color shock. Most of them go immediately into like a hallucination or remembering, flashback, because of the visual stimuli. It's just the way that it works with the brain. So it is just a fact that is the way that it works with the brain, is the visual stimulus is one of the most important factors in contributing to a flashback or dissociating or perseverating like this young man did, enough that it was kind of the biggest factor for him. So, and I've spoken to, as soon as this happened, I reached out to a lot of my acquaintances or friends that I have that have experienced suicide ideation, or I know that they have a loved one that did, and I wanted to make sure they were okay and see if they'd seen it. And a lot of them that had watched it have been experiencing a lot of distress. I have a friend who hasn't tried to commit suicide in quite a few years, and she felt like the issues were so off, and that she felt so not represented. She felt so invalidated. And then the trigger scene happened. And the thing is, like, there's a viewer discretion. First of all, teens will do everything you tell them not to, so that doesn't do anything. Sure. It's popular, so everyone's going to watch it. And it doesn't say like exactly what it says, like for your discretion graphic, whatever following. And the biggest thing is in the first 2 weeks, people didn't know what that was. Now we have all these things where like, if you have suicide ideation, don't watch this. But in the first 2 weeks, there was nothing saying that. And there was nothing saying like, if you've been raped, don't watch these 2 scenes because they show it from the approach to the completion of the act. And so now we're able to like say like, please don't watch it if you've experienced these things. But I think just I don't know why they did it, especially because in the book it's a pill overdose, which is actually more accurate. Girls tend to commit suicide in a way that's not going to hurt their body, and then boys tend to do something that distorts their body. So the pill overdose would have been closer to reality. So I really don't know why. I've talked to some people and they think it's shock factor or whatever, but regardless, it had an immediate effect on a lot of people. So again, I have many friends who've experienced suicide ideation that are really struggling. And thank goodness they knew to reach out to their support system. And just like they were able to notice. And the thing is they didn't notice for a couple days and they just felt unsettled. And then they started spiraling just like this young man did. It took a little bit and he just started spiraling. So it's one of those things where it's like sneaking, it gets you. So that's the main thing is the trigger scene. It's recklessly irresponsible. Even if you put something in front of it, I think they knew. I mean, it's really popular. It's really popular, and teens are going to do what you tell them not to do.
Right.
So right, like you can say, don't watch this, and they will immediately go watch it. So the biggest recommendation is that people are saying, please watch this with your children, so you can immediately process after, and you know that they watched it because if you tell them no, they're just going to do it anyways. Right. And to me, it's just so irresponsible of Netflix. I feel like at this point, with so many people saying, look at all of these consequences that have happened in less than a month that this has been out, that it should have been taken down. At least the scene itself should have been taken down. Like end of story. You're literally causing harm right now. So as someone that works in mental health, it's a huge ethics. Like it blows my mind. It blows my mind. So I think an argument I've heard is someone said, well, what about war videos, or war movies, PTSD victims can watch those, blah, blah, blah. I think the difference is a war victim, or not a war victim, a soldier, a vet, someone with PTSD knows what Saving Private Ryan is about. They know what's going to be in it. It's rated R. They know. And in the first 2 weeks that the show was out, people didn't know. Not as many people had read the book. I know a lot of people are coming to the defense, but they just didn't know. And then the damage was done for a lot of people. So I think that is the biggest factor right now. And so I think the next two things that need to be addressed, everyone keeps saying this. By everyone, I mean myself and my colleagues. And when I say my colleagues, I mean not just music therapists, because not all of us work in mental health. I'm talking about the social workers who do. I'm talking about psychologists, psychiatrists, people who work not just with adolescents with suicide ideation, but adults who have long-term dealt with this, or people maybe who are all of a sudden out of nowhere dealing with this because of a traumatic event. I'm talking about everyone in the mental health field. It is at this point established that this show does glamorize suicide. Because it is a suicide revenge fantasy. So basically, this is really the core of why I was upset, is that this girl has all of these things happen to her, all these events, and she's able to logically line them up into a timeline and say, this happened, which took away my ability to be believed. This happened, which ruined my reputation. This happened. So it's like building up. And so then people didn't respect me, and then people wouldn't listen to me, and then that led to me getting raped, and then that led to me seeing a rape, and then no one believing me, and then me getting raped, and then I tried to talk to someone and I couldn't be believed because my reputation was broken, so then I killed myself. And she makes these tapes, honing in on everyone that did her wrong, and 1 out of 5 reasons for someone to commit when they're having suicide ideation is revenge, is getting back at someone, is hurting someone. And so this targets one of the very reasons, and it glamorizes it because, and I say glamorize because the people that she seeks revenge against get hurt. They are traumatized. They are upset. They finally feel what she meant. They say, man, if I'd only done something different, if one thing had been different, if I hadn't passed her that letter, it would have been different, which is ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. And that completely invalidates the reasons that people commit suicide or that people have suicide ideation. It is not one event after another, after another, after another. There are certain brain changes that happen that lead to suicide ideation. And so it glamorizes it because it takes this, one of the 5 reasons that people want to commit suicide, and she achieves it, and it happens. This thing that she wants is to seek revenge and to hurt these people, and it occurs, and it happens because she committed suicide. So not only, it's like a success story, you know, like she did this, and then the people that she wanted to hurt got hurt. And that's terrible. It is horrible, like absolutely awful. So people can say all day long, it doesn't glamorize suicide, but it does. That's a glamorization right there. So that's very concerning, and that's one of the biggest ones out there. So the mental health issues, I want to talk about that and the difference between what is happening in the show and what happens for people with suicide ideation. And now I've heard both sides. I've heard someone say, I feel like this really emphasized the issues that we face every day and why I wanted to commit suicide. And actually, I don't have any friends that said that. I only saw that on other people's posts. So I don't know. But everyone I've talked to has said, this is awful. This does not explain anything. So basically, my main issue with it, this is like my opinion, and then I'm going to put some fact into it. Pretty much everything that I'm referencing here on out, I'm going to talk a little bit about the neurobiology of trauma and the neurobiology of depression and anxiety and brain structures and things like that. I'm pulling from The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, 2012. It's a great book. If you work with anyone that could possibly be traumatized, you should read it. It's very easy to read. Really good book. He's like the leading psychotherapist for trauma research. He's amazing. And I can send you the link and title and everything for that.
That would be nice.
Mm-hmm. So the main issue here is that, and I kind of touched on this, that this character, Hannah, is able to look back and say there are 13 reasons why. Well, there's like technically 12, and she has this like reason she basically wants her friend to like call out the person who raped her and get it on tape and blah, blah, blah. But anyways, so there's all these reasons why I'm committing suicide, and you're one of them, and you're one of them. And she's able to go back chronologically and say, this happened, and then this happened. And I just want to point out that that is logical. Suicide is not logical. It's not. If you are in that space, you no longer have the capacity to be logical. Because if you could do that, if you could say, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, which led to this, you could also say, if I do this, then I can do this, then I can do this. The biggest thing with someone who has depression or trauma, who has been traumatized, is there is a disconnect. Well, there's a lot of disconnects. I'll talk about a lot of them, but they no longer have the ability to imagine consequences, to imagine anything. That is the biggest thing. They either only see terrible things. They only see war scenes. They only see awful consequences, or they imagine nothing. So, for example, when presenting children with basically like benign pictures that have no connotations at all. It might be a pregnant lady standing next to a window, or kids with dad as they're fixing a car. They present traumatized children with these pictures. Okay, let's start with not traumatized children, typically developing children, and asked to tell a story. They will tell a completely, just again, benign story. It doesn't have a bad ending or a good ending. It's just like, this lady is waiting for her husband to come home and bring dinner from McDonald's because she's really hungry because she has a baby, or so-and-so and so-and-so are helping dad fix the car, and then they're going to go to the park. Okay. So traumatized children, or children. So trauma is the number one factor for depression and anxiety. Just putting that out there. 95% of people who are in inpatient psychiatric units have experienced trauma. Trauma is the number one cause of health issues in our country. It's like maybe number 3, but it's up there. And it's the number one cause of mental health issues. End of story. So trauma is really what we should be looking at here. And so traumatized children presented with these pictures, either their stories ended horrifically, like the little girl is going to bash her dad's head in with a wrench and then kill her brother and take the car for a drive. And they say it with no emotion. Like, that's just how the story goes, or they can't imagine anything at all. They can't think forward. And that's how trauma works. Trauma either makes you hypervigilant and all you can imagine is a terrible ending because that's all you've experienced and your brain has been wired to know only that, which is why traumatized children act out all the time, because if you look at them funny, you might be trying to kill them,
Right.
or they cannot imagine anything. Okay. And if you can't imagine anything, like if you don't have the ability to imagine, that means you're not thinking about what you want to be when you grow up. You're not thinking about, these are the things that motivate us. Like, I can get through a class because I'm thinking about what I want for lunch. They can't do that. I got to where I am today because I could get through homework, because I wanted to get an internship, because I wanted to have a job.
Right.
They lose the ability to have relationships with friends and family because they're numbed out, right? So there's no logic in that. In these experiences, they don't have the ability to look at this picture and say, you know what, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, which led to this. They don't have that ability. They either panic and say, here's this horrific thing that's going to happen, or they see nothing. And then nothing tends to be the people that commit suicide because they cannot imagine a future. They have no ability to imagine that. So you're taking this character that can logic her way to her suicide. And that is what bothers me, is that is so unrealistic. So the people that are out on the other side are saying this doesn't capture my experience, and I can't tell you why. I don't know why. That's why. Because there's an underlying mental health issue that they are not addressing, and it usually has to do with trauma. Trauma creates depression. Trauma creates anxiety. Trauma creates complex trauma. It creates PTSD, and PTSD, I think, is the leading factor I read for suicide. And so the show tried to touch on saying, like, okay, so here's these two traumatic events that happened to her. Well, kind of three. Okay, so I kind of wished, like, if the show had been done right, I imagine it would have started there, and not had this like leading up, like, and then no one believed me because someone tried to slut shame me, and so no one believed me anymore. My reputation was scarred. That kind of. Again, I've already talked to that. Just doesn't really fit. I would say it started with the events. So like there was one where she was kind of her fault that someone got in a car accident because they knocked over a stop sign, and she was trying to deal with that guilt. Guilt can be very traumatizing. Okay. And she witnessed a rape, and she was intoxicated, so she couldn't do anything about it. That's pretty traumatizing. And then she was raped, and she wasn't believed. So I can see, like, okay, if those things happen to someone. But here's the thing with her situation. It's still unrealistic because if we're looking at the reasons that people develop post-traumatic stress disorder, you have to have poor attachment to your parents. Usually, it is the number one factor for not having resilience. So between the ages of 0 to 7 is when you develop your attachment and your resilience. And attachment is the style of attachment that you develop with your parents is indicative of your processing and your coping skills in adults. The Vander Kolk talks about this a lot. So if you have anxious attachment, you're going to be an anxious person. If your parent ignores you, if you're detached, basically, then that's how you are going to react as well. So attachment is indicative of how you're going to react. And the thing is, at the beginning, they show a really good relationship with her parents, and they never really show. Like, they show that she doesn't listen to her because they're really preoccupied. But unfortunately, that's not really big enough reason. And it's possible, like they could say, oh, things happened when she was a kid. But they really emphasize that she had this great relationship with her parents. They loved her. She really trusted them. And so, like, me watching, I'm like, the number one thing for me was, like, unrealistic because she was resilient. She had all the mark of being resilient, and people that have that attachment are more resilient, and they don't develop trauma, and they don't react in the same way. So basically, what they were doing was creating two different characters. They started with Hunter, and I know they're trying to show like this can anybody, which is true. But for example, like the people I know of that had good attachment, the parents were also sexually abused by their siblings and had a lot of long buried trauma that they didn't understand, which led to depression. and they didn't understand, and they had to sit with that guilt and not knowing, and then when they went to therapy, those things came up, but feel bad, and then they faced suicide ideation. So it is just, it's just like they. Someone said, if someone said suicide, it would be because of this, and they didn't research, and it showed someone that actually stays like I have a friend that I know that was sexually abused by a father that wanted to commit suicide. She's attempted at least twice. She was very young. She was very young, so that's very trauma, and that completely changes. Especially the child brain develops, and it's to basically shutting down the midline brain on both sides, which detaches your ability to that is the part of our brain that makes us animals. That's the part that makes us know we are sentient. We know we're alive because of that part in your brain. You know you exist. So when that part shuts down, you don't. When people say I don't feel like I'm alive, I don't hear. That's because they've been traumatized. Part of the brain is shut down. So for her to have those things so quickly and then go straight to suicide is really unrealistic. Some other factors that would needed to be there. And so I just feel really bad because the people that have gone through those things face a lot of issues. Yeah, and then you're looking at have faced these things. That I have friends who have been sexually assaulted that have never thought about suicide. Now they're watching the show. I'm like, I have been thinking about suicide. My kid literally come up. Like, why haven't I thought about that? Why didn't I react that way? And then they're feeling guilt. Survivor's guilt. Some of them is not even real. So that's ridiculous, right? And then you have people who have depression because their brain actually different than people's. Maybe they're born. Maybe they just like their serotonin doesn't stay in there, right? That's why we have SSRIs. So their brain functions from birth, and they haven't traumatizing events, and they just want to kill themselves because they can't think of a future, and they're watching the show, and they're like, well, I'm never gone through this, and I want to do suicide, so who am I? Why do I deserve to be here and gone through any of this? So it's just there's so many issues. It's a lot.
It seems to me like with what you're saying, like they started with this character that they started with the end part, and they sort of reverse engineered someone. Like, okay, I wanted to commit suicide, and instead of starting with a person, thinking what would make that happen, because not everyone that has a traumatic event ends up wanting that, or it's so they just sort of worked with what would work for TV. Well, this is a good character, maybe. Like I said, I don't know what the book was like, but it seems like they developed maybe in a parallel way, but the idea of they started with something that they could sell that's relatable enough to where people could like, oh yeah, I could see that being me. This must be important to me. But they didn't take any care to somebody might who's, and maybe you can comment on this, somebody that doesn't know or is in a state of some sort of upset mental state. They're finding these pieces they can put together that might lead to suicide where they wouldn't have occurred naturally. Somebody that's not all the way there. They're maybe halfway there on the fence or something. Like, oh, I saw my friend do this in high school. This person wrote me this note. This person sent this photo of me. Well, I wasn't going there before, but now I am, because I see. Well, now it's logic. Now it is something that I can observe and is right. And is popular and people agree with it. And so, well, it must be true because I see it now.
Yep. I think one is that's very true. There's a common phenomenon when friends start self-harming. Many people in a friend group do. You're exactly right. It say like it catches, but it's just because a lot of times if you are going through very similar things, I maybe will help you deal with this problem they're going through. Which leads me to another side of why talking about adolescents is vulnerable. And I just want to be very clear because adolescents are amazing and they go through so much. But I want to point out why they're vulnerable. Adolescents go through a second neuroplastic stage. They go through neuroplasticity again. So this happens when you're learning, and that's it's really important for attachment and personality development. For all of these wonderful things to place for baby, and why we're so focused on child development, child, and their baby, right? So 3 to 7 is like when you're really developing personality, and really like the most neuroplasticity 0 and 3. Adolescents are another stage of neuroplasticity because of the increase in hormones and everything that's going on in the body. When they hit 12, 13, and it lasts longer for males. So like 17-ish for girls, and then keeps going to like 21 for guys. So they are literally actually more vulnerable because their brain has entered a state of neuroplasticity, which means they are extremely moldable, right? They're really impressionable. Like, and not because they're dumb, because their brains are actually in a different stage than they were preteen. It's just fact. Like so they are actually more all these hormones, and so they can't regulate. So a lot of times their limbic system kicks in faster than the cortex. So meaning they think their emotions first or their frontal lobe before that makes a conscious logical decision. So they're very vulnerable, and they're gonna think that way. What can I do to fix this emotional situation? What can I do to feel better? So impressionable, and things like sound and visual and all of these senses hit your limbic system first, more impressionable. So if you see your friend self-harming, you're gonna do it. I mean, not everyone. It's a phenomenon that happens. They literally know about themselves are doing it. Friends are doing it. So yes, very true. And then it also made me think a good segue to the list of things not to do in regards to suicide for prevention. I'm pretty sure this can be found around suicide.org. I'm sure that is, but I will double check for you. The first one is don't sensationalize the suicide. So don't make it a big deal. And I want you to go through everything. Look at all of these through the lens of this show, and think of how many of these they do. Okay? So there's one. Do that. Don't talk about the contents of the suicide note if there is one. Okay, because we're looking at survivors. The entire show is a suicide note. 13 of them. Okay. Don't describe the suicide method. Okay. There you go. Report suicide is a public health issue. They do not do that. Also, they do not give any resources to people and how to deal with it. Anyways, I'll talk about that in a second. Don't speculate why the person might have done it. This whole show was why the person might have done it. Don't quote or interview police or responders about the causes of suicide. Okay. Describe the suicide as quote died by suicide or quote pleaded or quote killed him or herself rather than committed suicide. Because it places responsibility and completion. It puts responsibility on the person who committed suicide. It puts responsibility on the person who killed themselves, and also really emphasizes death as being a factor. This is final. One of the things I was reading was how adolescents for some reason have a harder time understanding death is permanent. Because of the stage of development that they're in. So that's why suicide is so dangerous, because they can imagine coming out as glorified somehow. Okay. And then the last thing is don't glamorize suicide, which we've already talked about. So it says these are guidelines for preventing suicide risk. And violating those guidelines, people violating one, and 13 reasons why it violates every single one of those guidelines. Every single one. Every single one. So it's like someone really good intention of bringing suicide to light. We need to pay attention to this terrible things are happening because they didn't listen to what they're talking about and do every day. Who deal with what is illogical. Someone wanted to end their life. They can't logically way out of it. And we were like, hey, here's a tried and true way to lower the rate of suicide attempts. Something else I was saying that
the medium that it was using, video. Basically, movies, shows, is really important to too. So it's not only besides the medium that they find really important. And that's why it's blowing up. So it's so many factors.
I think that one's important too, because I mean, anybody that's a person, anybody is a person of any kind of means. Not we're at a point now in technology where people have in their hands access to all sorts of great things, wonderful things, but also the worst things on the planet that are. And people are constantly making it, and that's not just the upper class. It's not like the crazy elite. Like, I had kids that had legitimate need, were on like somewhere near or below the poverty line, that had a smartphone in their hands, and it's commonplace, and that child could easily look at this and have no context for it whatsoever. Absolutely none. And it's not something that, it's not lack of necessarily parental supervision. It's not lack of adult caring, but there's going to be times in the day where you have to let them not be underneath you, and it's so readily available. And like the part that bothers me is that there is no context, and like I think you mentioned, you're probably going to expand on. It doesn't say anything. I didn't notice anything about mental health issues. It doesn't say, if you're having trouble, talk to these people. Here are all of these resources. That should come first, and it certainly shouldn't be omitted completely. My understanding, not even in the show that I've heard, is there any sort of? And I think I heard she goes to like a guidance counselor at the school, and that was less than effective. And I don't know if that's the case. I mean, certainly there's people that probably fall down on the job, but the lack of context, I think, is one of the things that's going to get people in trouble with this. You may have a lot more to say about that.
So on the show she goes to whatever his name is, Mr. Proctor or whatever. He's a counselor, and she pretty much accepts his job because he dismisses her, tells her to get over it, basically. So this is really great for someone that has ideation. Here they are watching a show, but they're basically told that they should watch. Everyone's wanting to watch the show. So good. Teens who have ideation watch this. Like I've literally seen people say this is really good for mental health. People that want to be advocated for, like watch this show that's standing up for me. Great. So of course kids are going to watch this. And we were talking about they're going to do it anyways. The best thing for someone that has depression, someone that has trauma is one warm, positive adult relationship. Is the best thing. One positive adult relationship can counteract everything the stress hormone does to your brain, everything depression does to your brain. It can counter all of these things. Which is why like music is important because I can be that relationship for that person, let alone what music does for the brain. So we talk a lot about the therapeutic relationship, but for us to get to that point, we convince teens that they can talk to adults, that they can trust us, and they don't want to trust going through individuation stage, going through the stage where they need to pull back and define themselves. They don't want to trust us, and now we show that they're being told to watch that's accurate, that it really depicts mental health. And here's this adult messes up really bad, and that's her down. And when she leaves his office, that's when she decides for sure to cement her brain. I'm suicide to an adult. The first one I went to said didn't help me, so I'm done. So that's dangerous. There's been a lot of letters about going out to our counselors and teachers, warning them of this and telling them to tell their students, you talk to me. Like let me tell you the rules and the laws. You talk to me. I am wired toward it. I am not allowed to ignore you. And I also win it because I care about you. And so that's the other thing is that counselor in the show is so unrealistic. He would like fired. Clearly, he's trying to hide from the whole time. He's trying to pretend like it didn't happen. But we are required by law if someone comes up to us and talks to us about self-harm. We're required by law to report. If they talk to us about ideation, we're required by law to report. Often we have to admit somebody that they're experiencing active suicidal thoughts, not just ideation. Because I want to say there's a difference. Ideation is reading about it and you're imagining what it might be like. And a lot of people experience suicidal ideation because when you're going through a problem, your brain very quickly says there are as many solutions as it can think of. And while that's happening, it is basically categorized some this could work. These might not work. A lot of people experience suicide ideation because that's a possibility, right? That's a way to end a problem. Like man, I really don't want to do this step, and then I can pop up. Most people filters out to the ridiculous side, right? So people get freaked out. Like, oh my gosh, I had this thought. Sometimes it's really not bad. You're back in recycling things, but it's when it becomes like when you have active suicide thoughts and you're having a plan and you're really thinking about it all the time as your way out. That's when it's a problem. So when it is that, it's an active suicide threat. We are required to report. We're required to report abuse. We're required to report rape. Like all of these things, we're required to report. So it gave a very bad message to a population that doesn't trust us. Anyways. So that sucks. And it's also against the law and training that this counselor would have gone through. So there's one more unrealistic thing. I'm really stressed out about this. Clearly.
Well, no, and I'm honestly I am too, and I just when I was teaching in public school, I made sure that to let kids, and like I said, I had like whatever the basic training was, which was nothing. It was laughable for a classroom teacher. It was not, but I went the extra mile, and maybe I did or maybe I didn't. I think it's kind of human decency, but I was like, if you guys are having any trouble, and like for some reason feel like you can't go to you can come to me. I was always very welcoming. I was like, look, I've been through stuff. I've lived life, and I'm not some crazy out there space person that's come to yell at you and give you homework. Like, I'm a person, and if you have problems, and hopefully when kids come to me with something that sounded to me to be very trivial, but I never let them think that, and I was always like, oh man, I totally see how that could be. Here's and sometimes I didn't give any advice. I didn't give any counseling. I just listen. A lot of times I think that helped. I hope it did anyway. And sometimes I would say, yeah, I totally see how that would be. I totally see how that would be distress, just cause you distress. And I would say, oh, well, here's maybe what the other person was thinking, or here's maybe a thing that happened that you maybe didn't know about. And they were like, oh, I never thought about that before. It's usually something simple, and if it's not, thankfully I didn't have to. I've never had to send anyone, I guess, above me. I got really lucky, I think, in that way. And I hope that I'm able to help people. But it's so important because I don't want any student, young person, child, whoever, or adults to feel like, first of all, regardless outside the show, that there's no hope, that there's no options, that there's nothing. There's always something, and specific, and this, there's a way to tell, like, here's what it looks like when someone is open to help you. Here's who they are. Here's how to find them. Here's when and where to go and what to do. And pointing out stuff like this show. Here's what not to do, because that can be just sometimes even more so.
Yeah.
And we can, obviously we have more. I wanted to, and I'm not going to say that I'm going to play devil's advocate, because I'm not going to advocate for the show. Like, I wasn't going to, and hearing all the specific reasons why I'm not interested in advocating for the show.
Right.
But I do. What would the show, like, what could they do to lessen the impact? Let's say we were writing a letter to Netflix, which I may or may not be currently drafting. Let's say
the APA is too.
Well, I hope so, and I hope somebody is doing something. But what are some things that what can we do? What can we do to help people that have seen the show that don't have context for it? What are how could we frame the show for somebody who's going to watch it anyway? And what could the show do to lessen its impact or fix it, or does it need to just be completely pulled off? Like, in your opinion?
I think it should be pulled off. I could be overreacting, but I am known for being a fierce advocate for my clients. Fierce. Like I have gotten some knockout arguments with people. I'm a fierce advocate for safety all the time. So I think it should be taken off. I can imagine some sort of compromise where they take out this trigger scene. It still doesn't change the fact that it's suicide. Which is terrifying. So I think it should be taken off. I think there are beautiful ways to approach suicide, and I know that they're really trying to do that. So like I get it, but they missed the mark. Reckless. So I think it should be taken off. I think so. We need to make people very aware of how they can receive help. I think so. I've been telling people. If you see the show, monitor yourself because I say some stuff. It took me probably 2 days after I was really getting moody, and things that are triggers tend to be for everyone in some way or another. There's a reason why these things are upsetting, and it triggered. Even though I don't have issues, I triggered something, and I don't know if it's a protective factor, like I want to protect clients or something. But I was really upset, but it took me. So the number one thing I would say is monitor yourself. Please be very conscious of your body responses and any changes that are happening, because they tend to develop psychological stress. First, just a little distress. Just really key in with yourself and get in touch with your body, because those things will tell you first. And then the second I would say, people of forensic family that have experienced suicide or have attempted suicide, reach out immediately and ask if they have watched the show. If so, ask them how they're feeling and offer your support and remind them that you love them, that you are there to support them, because they may not be triggered, they may not experience anything, but they very well could, you don't know. So just remind them that they have a support, they have something. If something's kind of growing up around them before they need to reach out, because oftentimes when they reach out, people don't. So just reach out to everyone. So then I think the next thing is for people who do have access to adolescents. So people like me, therapists, I'm sure we're all wrong. All this were like talking to our groups and everything. But teachers, music teachers, anyone that has access to adolescents. Just I guess it depends on your relation, because I would have a discussion that you're not, but I'm also trained, so I'm comfortable having that discussion. I'm sure counselors are having these discussions with kids, but just letting them know what the resources are available. And I think what you were saying, like letting kids know that you are here to talk, and you really care about them, and you want what's best for them, and really care for them, and that there is support, and they know their options. Because I think sometimes students don't care what teachers have to say, but you know students usually have one teacher that they really connect with. So if every teacher is saying this in every class, someone will hear you. And what you're saying is so important. I cannot tell you how important it is. How much this their value to teachers that have these relationships, because they see them more than we do. Right? We get in there and do the work that is trying to change the way the brain is functioning. Right? It's really intense work. It's once a week or maybe twice. Maybe you're in home. But the teachers are there so much more often. And the research shows that one positive one relationship can change everything. Someone whose trajectory is going the wrong way can change everything. And it can be someone who's not just someone who. And so I don't say don't therapy, but counsel, listen, hear them, and then if they want to self-harm, they're at risk. You need to send them to the counselor. So then I think the next step is, if you know of someone who is having harming themselves, or they have suicidal thoughts, the next step is taking them to the ER. So I think these are the resources that you need to know. This is what happens. This is how you get help. So the first step is to go get to the ER, where you'll be put
basically you take to the ER
so
to
that they can watch you,
so
they can make sure you don't hurt yourself, because you are valuable and you are worth that. You are worth being saved. You are worth being helped. You are worth being heard. So they will do that. They basically will put them into an acute inpatient, usually a floor, a unit. They'll monitor, and they'll usually you have to stay a week-ish until you're stabilized enough for them to figure out what happens next. So stabilized to where you are not actively a risk to yourself or others. So they usually can stabilize with meds. Usually that happens. People either haven't been on meds ever, they're diagnosed, or they're off their meds, or it's sometimes just put them on to be stabilized in that moment, because it's a crisis. Then what will happen is they will also receive therapy in that cancer facility. It's a good fit. They'll probably stay with that person. They might continue to receive services after, depending on how much of a crisis it is. They might move maybe a residential facility, or long-term facility, or maybe just transitional facility, something a little bit longer. And then they'll move to outpatient, and they can move to just therapy. But I just want to point out, like, psychotherapy is amazing. There's things like music therapy, art therapy do wonders, and it's completely backed by research. Things that happen to your brain when you experience depression, experience anxiety, you've experienced stress, trauma, and your brain is functioning differently than typical people. So the things that you're feeling if you want to commit suicide, because your brain is functioning differently. And therapy works specifically to restore balance, so that you can function in a way that is not distressing, so that you can receive happiness, and then you can feel fulfilled. So you can feel anything. Most people that want to commit suicide have a brain and body disconnect because of the parts of the brain that are shut down. So therapy works to reconnect, to turn on basically the parts of the brain that have been turned off. And help people when those parts of the brain turn back on. People feel they literally feel their bodies again. They feel hope, because the other part of the brain turns back on. Things that they can't imagine because it's turned off. It's like explaining color to a blind person. For real. And I just want people to know that it is amazing when it works. And sometimes it's a really long road. It can be a really hard battle of trying to find the right meds and the right therapy and all those things. But I always just want people to know that they are so worth it. And there's definitely someone out there that cares about you and wants to see you get through it. So those are the things that we can do. And we should definitely post the National Prevention Suicide hotline. The lifeline, because they have trained therapists and counselors at all times. So if you're ever feeling it's like it can't handle it, can't ER, don't want to go to an ER, they are always there to talk people through it.
Yeah, I want to. I mean, of course, along with our conversation, I want to have. I will type a 5-page blog post if I think it's worth it, and if you think there's enough information to share, of course I'll put it up, and I'll pay some advertising money to make sure that people see it, because that's how important it is to me. So yeah, I mean, it's extremely important to me. So
Yeah.
Okay, so we took a little bit of a break from the show for we obviously to lower some tensions, and also it's good for people to hear what some of the options are.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the most important part of this, is like moving through what can we do to fix, what can we do to move forward, and talk about the hopeful part of it.
I think there's a stigma around therapies. As a matter of fact, that's kind of a good. I wanted to talk to you about this, I think, last time. Now, I've experienced some trauma in this vein, and there's a reason why this is very, very important to me. And I went to a few sessions of therapy, and I wasn't required to. Nobody asked me to. I just thought it was good to make sure that I was as grounded and stable and on the right path like I thought I was, because I thought I've got this. This was not a wonderful event that happened, but I thought, okay, I'm thinking straight, I think, but I'm gonna make sure. And I went, and it was lovely. It didn't feel it didn't feel sterile. It was a very warm environment. And I know that people have been in worse mental states than when I went to therapy, and it may seem like those environments are sort of cold and like a hospital. I can't think of the word. I think maybe sterile is the word that I'm thinking of, like uninviting. But for people that are able to listen, and I know this is from a patient's perspective. I've been. It's wonderful. The people are all, of course, super friendly. They understand. They've dedicated their lives, at least a good part of their adult life and their professional career, to helping people. Like not judging, not doing anything that they don't think will help you. And I think that's coming from me as someone who's personally gone through it. And I think you as a professional, I'm sure will agree, especially if music therapy was a thing. I would have that would have been really cool, because I don't know, it would have been good to like sing my feelings out and have something. I'm not going to pretend to know the ins and outs of a session, but that kind of thing, I think is good for people that might be scared about taking the jump and going and getting help. It's not all a cold hospital bed in the dark room of a hospital, and it's not going to be the night shift nurse who doesn't care and just you're their 1400th patient or whatever. Like, I don't think it's like that. I don't want to say like cell therapy, but you can probably give a more apt and detailed description of it that might be a little bit more inviting to someone apprehensive about getting help.
Sure. I think one of the most important things to note is that I think the stigma and the socialization of masculinity is a factor here. A lot of people think if you get therapy, you're weak, and it really has to do with this, really just the idea of what being a man is and how to be masculine, the whole concept and construct of masculinity. So you have to be strong. You can't show weakness. You can't seek help. That's the number one thing. So first of all, there's a reason why our mass shooters are men. Let's just put that out there. So that's something when we're talking about stigma that we are really dealing with, is that really trickles over to women as well, but more so men, is the idea that if you need therapy, you're weak. So first of all, there are many reasons you might need therapy, none of which are because you're weak. I go to therapy because all therapists should go to therapy, first and foremost, because we really need to make sure we're handling parts of our lives that have nothing to do with therapy outside of therapy, so that when we get into therapy, there's no transference and we aren't putting our issues onto other people. Now, that does not mean that therapists are screwed up, right? It just means that we're human. And so at the base level, therapy, I think everyone should have therapy, free therapy. And I'm not talking about counseling. I'm talking about therapy, because everyone has had a less than perfect childhood. Everyone's had something, right? Because you're raised by humans. Right. So everyone has had not a perfect childhood. And childhood is so important for developing coping mechanisms. So not everyone has coping mechanisms. Everyone has at least one maladaptive behavior. Everyone has at least one thing that they really suck at with interpersonal relationships. Everyone has been hurt. Everyone has hurt other people. So at the very base level, therapy is really for giving you an objective view of yourself and helping you work through those maladaptive behaviors and those coping skills and interpersonal conflict. And therapy is what you need it to be. Some people do really well with talk therapy. I do not. I do not do well with talk therapy. And I found that out very quickly. I tried like 3 or 4 and I was like, no, this is not going to work for me. And that's really important to note. If you're a male and in your mind, you're like, I will not do talk therapy, then you probably shouldn't do talk therapy. You should probably find something else. But I think psychotherapists are incredible at what they do. There's some dialectical behavior therapists or cognitive behavioral therapists. It's not just talking. They are trained to know what is going on in your brain when they assess you and they diagnose you, and they know what parts of your brain are functioning at a less than perfect level, and they know what to do and basically what parts of your brain to stimulate with the exercises that you're doing, with the things that you're vocalizing, the things that you're practicing to wake those things back up and strengthen those part of your brain. They know how to create neural connections in your brain that are stronger or reconnect them to wake up those parts or make your access to that parts of your brain easier, basically. So for a lot of males, I have found if I explain the neurobiology of what I'm doing, that I am accessing this part of the brain, that I'm specifically working to release dopamine in their brain, et cetera, they're like, oh, like you're not just singing at me or trying to get me to play a drum. Like if I explain what I'm doing, they find it a lot helpful or a lot more helpful. So I would do research on different kinds of therapies and see what might be helpful for you. I actually receive guided imagery and music, the Helen Bonny method. I'm gonna write that down because I'll send you information on her. It's psychotherapy, and it is far more effective than talk therapy for me because they say 1 session of GIM is as effective as like 6 months of talk therapy.
Wow.
It is really, really intense, but not everyone can have GIM. Anyone that has any sort of psychotic disorder like schizophrenia or anything like that can't do GIM because basically you're like getting so relaxed down, you enter an altered state of consciousness, which, just to be clear, these are very real things. When you daydream, that's an altered state of consciousness. And then it's guided basically by music, and you have a guide, and they're a psychotherapist. And the music has been researched and picked specifically to be put into programs that influence like emotions and your brain and everything. Like they have data on the waves and everything. And it helps you access parts of like repressed things or whatever that you don't actively think about because it's stored in your limbic system, and so the music can access it, and then the guide can help you process it, and then you process it after. And it's really cool because your psyche basically keeps you safe. Like you'll go down little by little, but it's like it is incredibly effective, and so that works really, really well for me because I suck at talk therapy. Like I do not want to do it. I'm really resistant. So this is really great because the music gets in there, and it's a music therapist. It's a type of music therapy, but you have to get like 5 to 7 years of training before you can do it because it's psychotherapy. Yeah, it's really intense. So that's what I get, and I always really recommend DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, and CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, for people, because these therapies make you or give you a really active role in your therapy. We have really gone past the years of Freud, where you have the therapist as the expert and the client as a person who is helpless. We are not doing that anymore. That's not what we do. We are giving people a voice and helping them recognize their own resources and their own resilience and their own ability. Like you have survived this long for a reason. The things that you have done to get here have worked. Like you are still here. So a lot of the therapies nowadays are helping you to recognize the strengths that you have and to build your voice and build your resilience, and basically increase all of these pieces of you and decrease maybe the maladaptive parts. So CBT and DBT are good because they give you control, which is usually what people, when they are experiencing psychological distress, they have a lack of control. And so these therapies are the most effective, honestly, in most disorders because the client has equal control and they're a team with the therapist. So, I would say like you're in control of your therapy. So if you go, the number one thing is I always feel like I'm shopping for a therapist, and it's really important because if you go and you are not connected to someone, or you feel like oh my God, this makes me think of my mother, and if you feel like it's wrong, get out. You are not obligated to stay. You need to find someone that is a match for you. Someone that you're like, and I've talked to people that find their therapist and like, this is it. This is the person. It happened to me. It happens to a lot of people. So I'd say, I mean, I think everyone should get therapy first and foremost, and then because right now there's such a strong stigma when you do reach out, it right now happens to be a sign of strength because you're having to overcome that stigma. So recognize when you see that in yourself, you're exhibiting awareness that is just incredible anyways. Not everyone is aware that they need help. So if you recognize that, you're exhibiting incredible awareness. And then if you're able to reach out, you're exhibiting strength for sure because there's such a stigma. And hopefully people that do reach out will be able to tell their story and say, I got help. And that will encourage others to get help too. So I think if anyone has gotten therapy and it was helpful, they should tell everyone. Like I got therapy. I'm not afraid to say it. Like I got help, and it was great or whatever. Go get therapy if you need it. It's okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different kinds. Like just you can find some good stuff out there.
Well, that to me is important because, and I like to try and maintain an open mind to all sorts of things, but particularly this thing, the idea of mental health, and of course I know people who have been therapists in different fields, so I know of course that there's, but having it, that would be an awesome thing to have, under the most pertinent and important stuff, talking about the show, suicide prevention, but then different kinds of therapy. Maybe you're going through something you didn't realize you could get help for, and maybe therefore tried to minimize it as a problem, but it's actually causing you a great deal of stress. That's huge. And I say that as someone who I know a lot of public school teachers. I know a lot of private lesson teachers. And I easily relate that to gigging musicians, gigging composers, gigging sound engineers. All of that relates so easy to what I do for my living. And I'm sure you know a lot of the same people being. That's why to me you're such a valuable resource, because you can relate things through your daily work, and that's really, really, really cool. Okay, so that's important. That gives us more stuff to share with everyone. Is there what else? What else about the show? I'm curious if you have any more thoughts, and now that we've cooled off a bit, because we talked about a lot of it, and I think it was all. So far, I agree with you. I'm probably gonna, again, so I can speak about it in an educated fashion. I'm probably gonna try and finish it. It might take me a while, because, like I said, a lot of these things, and I didn't realize it until I started thinking about it, and watching the first episode. There were some things about my high school experience. Not apples to apples, but there were experiences and thoughts and feelings that I had that I sort of mirrored, and I'm sure everyone probably has something like that. They recognize something from the show that they had in high school, but thoughts that Hannah was exhibiting that I felt a version of.
Yeah, I think that's why the show is so dangerous, because it is under this veil of. I'm kind of thinking about it now when you're like, I had a version of that, or I had something like that. And I was like, there were pieces that I experienced of that too. It's like they took every problem that a high schooler could possibly experience and put it in one person, because then it relates to everybody. And I think that's what's happening when people are saying, I really like the show. I can see why this could happen, because if you haven't experienced it or you aren't trained, it's logical. It could make sense. You're like, man, I've experienced that, and I imagine if I'd also experienced this, and this, I probably would have wanted to kill myself, and then now you're getting into the fatalistic view of, well, if enough things happen, then it's over,
right.
Which is dangerous in itself. But I think that's what's so dangerous about the show, is that they worked it from the TV standpoint, the sensational standpoint. How do we make this relate to people so that they want to keep watching it? How do I write this story in a way that they need to keep watching it? So they did that, right? And that's usually the mark of a really good show, a show that you can't stop watching, that you can't stop talking about. But then they had incorrect information, incorrect representation, and dangerous triggers. So it's really dangerous because it is well written in that it is addicting. It's well written in that they draw people in. It's like one of those shows, like I feel like 90210, where you're watching, you're like, this is ridiculous. It's so dramatic. But you're like, but I kind of relate, so I can't stop watching.
Yeah.
That's what it is, but it's a very serious topic. And so it somehow juxtaposes, and they did not mean to do this. They somehow have this like drama of this show where you're like, this is kind of a ridiculous show. Like nothing, this would never happen. Like some of the stuff that the kids say, you're like, girl, that's the other thing is that like sometimes Hannah like overreacts to things. And so basically what they're doing is creating the suicide victim who overreacts to things. And I think they're trying to say like even someone who overreacts, like it's possible for them to fall victim, which is true. But what they're doing is creating this person who is like, didn't you see what he did to me? Why are you talking to him? Which is what every annoying teenage girl does. So what that's doing is creating a transference where you're feeling everything that you ever felt when you watched that annoying high school girl in her. And you're having that wall go up when you're watching this girl who's about to become a suicide victim. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there's just, yeah. So they have all the markings of good writing and good producing to draw you in, and then they just are reckless. So that's why it's dangerous, because they play on that. Like, oh, I feel this. I felt that in high school. And then you're reeled in, and then you're having to suffer the consequences.
Yeah.
So, because like, okay, so there's a lot of traumatizing shows. Like after I watched Requiem for a Dream, I woke up in my dorm room closet because I was so upset about it. Like I didn't know. I just like must have crawled in there in the middle of the night. So that show was really upsetting to me, and I didn't know. I didn't know that that was going to be that way. So like there are a lot of shows and movies that are very upsetting. And so this is definitely not to say that there aren't shows that have upset people. There aren't movies or anything that are personally traumatizing or triggering for people. But I think why this is so important and why this is being made a big deal is that it is so quickly become popular. And it's sort of become this thing where, like, if you care about kids and mental health, you need to watch this because it's accurate. I think that's why. And because Netflix is so influential and so many people watch it, and it's happening right now, you know? So I think that's the big difference. Like, it's not to say that there hasn't been other things. Like, Game of Thrones has so many rape scenes, you know? Walking Dead is so violent. But I have found that people who don't like violence don't watch Walking Dead because they see one scene and they're like, nope, and it's over. But no one has ever watched a zombie eat a human.
Right, like there's.
So it's not directly triggering.
We can't tell that there is dragons and zombies right now currently. Like we couldn't walk outside and see those things. Probably, I don't know. It's anything could maybe happen, but you know, for sure we could walk out and see a high school girl that looks just like Hannah might be going through the same thing, and now we don't know. Now we're like, well, if I look at her funny, is this, you know, am I going to get a tape later? And I don't.
Yeah. I think, and one of the things I was reading that a social worker was saying was, suicide is the victim's choice. Usually it is because they no longer feel as if they have a voice. They no longer feel like they can make choices, that they're in control, and it is usually a last act of control. So one of the most important things for basically people who survive a suicide, so people who live after someone in their family or a friend has died by suicide, is really working with that survivor's guilt and making sure they know it's not their fault, just because of secondary trauma, but also like that's their decision, unfortunately, which is why we work with that person. And that is not by any means to say like the rapes that happened, it's by the same person in the show. I am not by any means saying that like what he did is not awful. I am the loudest person in the world about slut shaming and victim blaming. And I mean, I work with domestic violence victims. Like that child needs some help, for sure. But that's not what the show is even talking about. The show does not focus on that. Those were things that happened that led to her suicide, right? And she doesn't say like he's the reason. There's a lot of other things. So that's definitely, I'm not trying to discount that awful thing at all. I'm just trying to say for sure that it's creating this other responsibility which is in therapy what we try to put the responsibility for everything that you do on yourself, mostly not because of the pressure of responsibility, but because people who need that help don't know that they can be in control.
Right.
And oftentimes suicide is their last attempt at control. So that's why DBT and CBT are so great, because it gives them control back.
Mhm.
So it's just a lot of stuff. I'm so sad. Ugh.
Well, it is a lot of stuff, but I mean, for those of us that have had thoughts about life, about living, because some people go through life and have never given. I'm sort of envious. People that have never given. It never occurred to them that, oh, I'm alive. I could very easily not be.
Mhm.
I'm a little bit jealous of that, because I have this weight of existence. I think about it actively,
Yeah.
and I have to weigh the options. Like, well, is this a good thing or a bad thing? Should I exist? Should I not exist? Well, of course, I've rationalized it. It's a wonderful thing, and everything that I understand is I'm very grateful and thankful for. But it's important. I know people close to me that have stayed in another place long enough to where they weren't any longer. So it's like it's a lot. It's dense, and it's hard to deal with and hard to be in, but it's important to keep trying and keep going and keep working at it. And I don't know, maybe we'll never figure it out, but I'm certainly on board for trying to keep working on figuring out and figure out as much as we can about it along the way.
Yeah, I would definitely say we should have a call to action for sure. Anyone that feels compelled to tell their story should. Everyone should be writing letters. Everyone should be writing posts. Everyone should be writing blogs. But I think letters, I don't know who we write to. I don't know. But I think we all need to be writing. I have a friend that was like, is Netflix going to get sued for this? Because they should, if they consulted psychologists and didn't do what they said. Like, if that is factual, I can't speak to that if that's true, because I'm not the psychologist they consulted, so I don't 100% know. But if that happened, I feel like if you have enough people saying, my son watched your show and watched the suicide scene over and over and over and ended up in a psych hospital. You have enough people saying that, you have serious ground for action. So I would say if you have a story, even if it is, this brought me back to a time and I didn't know, you're just like, your viewer discretion warning wasn't enough. I didn't know it was going to be that way. Or I have a friend who experienced that. I'm going to speak on their behalf. I think enough people do that, we could see something different happen.
I hope so. And I'm of course trying to promote and share this show for a lot of different reasons, but one of them being especially this kind of thing is very important. I will talk, I will listen, I'll share. I have no problem with talking or having an episode. What I do is based in music, but it's also the people speaking is musical to me. People's thoughts and feelings, somebody telling a story, I can see the music in that. I have no problem seeing the music in that. And if it, I don't think my listeners are so purist after 4 episodes. Like, well, you didn't really talk enough about like guitar pedals that I can't really. I'm willing to listen, and I'm willing to help people share their stories. And even if it's not this particular podcast, I've got a blog, I've got an access to an audience, and this is easy. And if it's something that I think can help, which I'm certain and positive that it can, because it's helped me, then I'm gonna sort of open up that channel.
What's interesting is I noticed, like in my realm of the Facebook world, the people who are not therapists, that are not enraged, but are upset and feel that they need to advocate, are the music educators. And I don't know what that means. I don't want to like make assumptions, but I think it really goes back to what you were saying in the beginning, that these people tend to be more emotional. And I don't think it is because they are into music. I think they're into music because they are emotional, because they feel things differently. And the people that that do feel things differently and that tend to be actually more depressed or more anxious, because they're in touch with those things, they are the better musicians. They're the better artists. They're the better actors. They're the people that can do things that the typical population can't. And so I've seen this empathy for people in a lot of my music educator friends. And they're the ones that are saying, I have a lot of adolescent females that are really hyped about this show, and it doesn't sit right with me. And they don't have the education, the mental health education, but they have the experience, and they know that their kids are vulnerable. They know their kids are emotional, and they see adolescents all the time. They see them every day. And I don't know what it is, but it is my music educator friends that are, besides the music therapists, that are like, hey, something is up with this.
Yeah.
So that can be the music plug, is that something's up with musicians, and they are like they're in tune with people. That's why they can create what they can create, because they're feeling it and they're sensing it. And I'm seeing some good things happening in terms of advocacy from my music educating friends, which is amazing.
That's good. That's reassuring. Definitely. And I'm gonna probably I'm gonna try and get this out and get it circulated, because this is happening now, and it's not.
Mm-hmm.
I've had wonderful conversations with people that weren't as pressing as this is a pressing matter. Absolutely. And
Yeah.
so I'll see, but I'll take care of all that logistics side. But is there anything else about the show, anything else about music or therapy, and that is pressing, or just anything you want to talk about before we wrap it up?
I think we covered a lot. I think you said something that I wanted to not re-illustrate, but reinforce. You said sometimes people get stressed out, and they might need help in the moment, and that's also true. Sometimes people need therapy for like in the long run. Like, I think because I'm a therapist, I will always seek therapy just to make sure. And some people have serious disorders and they need therapy for life. But there are also times when you go through a distressful event or a small traumatic event, and you need counseling, you need therapy. So sometimes you might need therapy for just a small amount of time, and that's okay too. Some people do that, and then they get through on the other side, and they don't need it again. I've heard it explained as lily pads, as using moments of seeking help to help you get across the pond, so you don't sink, but you have to kind of keep hopping forward. So some people do it that way, where they kind of, throughout different parts of their life, seek different moments of therapies. So I think that's important to know. Not everyone's going to be the same. Just because you need therapy now doesn't mean you need it all the time. Yeah. But I think everything else we pretty much covered. I'm okay with everything else, I think.
Well, and there's always an open forum. And what I'm hoping is that it gets. See, I like raising awareness, but like kind of the right kind. If I'm not making any money off of doing this, like I'm not going for ratings. I only want people to listen, in that it will help them. If nobody listens, my livelihood's not staked on it. I hope people listen, and I think they do. I think they will listen. But I mean, as always, thank you 115,000 million times. I'm excited to have this medium. I really am very thankful and grateful to be able to share, and to have people like you who really care and are doing great things, and in ways that I can personally relate to. And I'm psyched you got to use your rad new mic, and you got all this.
Yeah, I think it worked well. Hopefully, we'll see.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, I'll let you go, but again, thank you so much, and I'll be talking with you a lot over the next few weeks, I'm sure.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me again. Thank you. Bye.